In a small barn outside Cottage Grove, Oregon, a man named Ianto Evans built a wood-burning device the heating industry has spent 45 years pretending doesn't work. It cost less than $200 in materials. It burned 90% less wood than a standard stove. The exhaust leaving the chimney was so cool you could rest your hand against the pipe. The year was 1980. The device was called a rocket mass heater. And 4.5 decades later, you almost certainly cannot legally install one in your home. This is the story of why. Let us start with what a rocket mass heater actually is, because if you have never seen one, the design sounds invented. The combustion chamber is shaped like the letter J, lying on its side. You drop short pieces of wood vertically into the open end, where gravity feeds them downward into a horizontal burn tunnel. From there, the burning gases turn a corner and shoot upward through a vertical insulated chimney called a heat riser. This riser is wrapped in a perlite and clay slurry and surrounded by a steel drum, usually a 55-gallon barrel turned upside down. What happens inside that geometry is the entire point of the device. The insulation around the heat riser traps so much heat that combustion temperatures climb above 1,000 degrees Celsius, hot enough that almost every molecule of fuel and smoke gets burned a second time in the air before it can leave. A normal wood stove sends most of its smoke straight up the chimney as wasted fuel. A rocket mass heater incinerates that smoke as part of its design. The hot gas hits the top of the steel drum, radiates heat into the room, and then sinks down the outside of the riser into a long horizontal duct. That duct, sometimes 10 meters long, snakes through a bench made of cob, brick, or stone. As the exhaust travels through this thermal mass, the dense earthen material absorbs nearly every remaining unit of heat. By the time the gas exits the chimney, it has cooled to around 120 degrees Fahrenheit. In some designs, the water vapor in the exhaust actually condenses inside the duct, releasing latent heat the way a high-efficiency gas boiler does. You sit on the bench. The bench is warm. It stays warm for 12 hours. It stays warm for 24 hours. You burn small armfuls of wood, the kind most people throw away as yard waste, and your house remains heated through a winter night on a fraction of the fuel a conventional stove would demand. The numbers, verified in independent computational modeling and operational testing, are not modest. Carbon monoxide emissions are below 50 parts per million. Particulate matter is comparable to, and in some configurations better than, EPA certified Phase 2 wood stoves. Wood consumption is reduced by 70 to 90% compared to an open fireplace or a basic stove. For roughly $200 in fire brick, sand, clay, and a recycled steel drum, you can build the cleanest, most efficient wood-burning home heater ever designed. So why is this not in every off-grid cabin in America? Why is this not the default backup heating system in every rural farmhouse? Why, when you call your local building department and ask about installing one, does the conversation end with a polite suggestion that you consider a pellet stove instead? To understand that, we have to talk about how heating equipment becomes legal in the first place. And the answer is going to surprise you, because it has very little to do with whether the equipment actually works. The first wall is the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA. The EPA certifies wood-burning appliances under a testing protocol that assumes one specific kind of object: a manufactured stove, built in a factory, to consistent specifications with serial numbers and a UL listing, and a manual that comes in the box. You send the EPA a representative unit. They burn wood in it under controlled conditions. They measure emissions. They certify the model number. A rocket mass heater does not have a model number. It is built on site, by hand, from local materials, around the specific shape of someone's living room, by the homeowner. Every single one is custom. The thermal mass might be cob in Oregon, and adobe brick in New Mexico, and reclaimed concrete in Vermont. The duct might run 10 meters in one house and 7 meters in another. There is no factory. There is no representative unit. There is no assembly line. The EPA certification system, in other words, was designed for a different kind of object entirely. It is not that the rocket mass heater has been tested and rejected. It is that the testing apparatus has no slot for it. The hole in the certification map is the same shape as this technology, and the technology falls right through. A company in Missouri called Liberator Rocket Heaters has tried to solve this by building a manufactured rocket heater in a factory, certified to UL 1482, the standard for wood stoves. They are currently the only UL-listed rocket heater on the market. Their second-generation unit is currently going through EPA testing. If it passes, it will be the first EPA-certified rocket heater in American history. It will also cost several $1,000s, will not include a thermal mass bench, and will largely defeat the original promise of the technology, which was that a person of modest means could build their own clean, efficient heating system out of materials from a hardware store. The certified version is, in other words, a different product entirely. We will come back to that. The second wall is local building code. In most American jurisdictions, residential construction follows some version of the International Residential Code, commonly called the IRC. Section R1002 of the IRC covers masonry heaters and references ASTM, Standard E1602, which describes solid fuel-burning masonry heaters. A rocket mass heater is technically a hybrid masonry heater, and a sympathetic building official can sometimes permit one under Section R1002 if the construction follows the masonry heater specification closely enough. Most cannot. The standard rocket mass heater includes a steel drum, metal ducting embedded inside the thermal mass, and a J-tube geometry that does not match the firebox dimensions described in the masonry heater code. A building inspector reviewing a permit application sees a custom site-built device with metal components, no manufacturer documentation, no model number, no UL listing, and no template in any codebook on the office shelf. The default response to this is rejection, because building inspectors are not in the business of inventing new permit categories. They are in the business of matching submissions to existing codes, and when nothing matches, the submission goes back to the applicant marked deficient. The city of Portland, Oregon, spent years developing a one-week approval process for rocket mass heaters, working with rocket heater builders Ernie and Erica Wisner. It exists. It is one of the only such processes in the country. Portland is the exception that makes the rule visible. The third wall is insurance, and this is where the suppression goes from procedural to financial. Homeowners' insurance policies almost universally exclude coverage for damage originating from unlisted, non-code compliant heating equipment. A chimney fire from a rocket mass heater that was technically legal under your local code, but never UL listed, can still void your entire policy. Insurers do not care about the elegance of the engineering. They care about whether the device has a certification number they can look up. Most rocket mass heaters do not. So even in a rural Vermont county with no residential building code, where you can technically install whatever you want in your own home, you may discover after a small fire that your insurance company has declined to cover the damage, that your mortgage requires insurance, that your bank now considers the loan in default, and that the cheapest, cleanest, most efficient wood heater ever invented has just cost you your house. If this is the kind of story that interests you, the buried physics, the regulatory archaeology, the gap between what works and what is allowed, hit subscribe. This channel covers suppressed and overlooked home energy technology every week, and the next one is going to be uncomfortable for some industries. Now we come to the question that anyone watching this video is already asking, which is, who actually benefits from this arrangement? Because at some point you have to look at the situation and at the powerful financial interests that surround every alternative heating method and ask whether the regulatory walls are quite as accidental as they appear. The American residential heating market is enormous. Pellet stoves, oil furnaces, propane systems, natural gas heating, electric heat pumps, baseboard heaters, all sold and serviced by industries that depend on customers buying fuel, buying replacement parts, buying maintenance contracts, and replacing the unit every 15 to 20 years. The pellet stove industry alone moves hundreds of thousands of units per year in the United States. The home heating oil industry distributes billions of gallons every winter. Electric utilities count winter heating load as one of their largest revenue categories. A rocket mass heater built from fire brick and a recycled steel drum, fueled by yard waste and small branches, lasting decades with almost no maintenance, is not just a different product. It is the absence of a product. It is a customer who has left the market and is not coming back. The fuel bill goes to zero. The replacement cycle goes to never. The maintenance contract does not exist because there is nothing in the device that wears out. From the perspective of every company whose business depends on selling you heat in some packaged form, this is not a threat to one product line. It is a threat to the entire premise of the industry. The certification industry itself benefits from the existing system. Testing labs, code consultants, and manufacturers who can afford the certification process all have a structural incentive to keep the rules complicated and the bar high. Testing a single wood stove model for EPA certification can cost tens of thousands of dollars. The labs that perform that testing make their living from those fees. The consultants who help manufacturers navigate the certification process bill by the hour. A homeowner with $200 in a weekend is not their customer. A manufacturer paying for repeated emission tests and listing fees is. Building inspectors operate inside this same incentive structure, even though most of them have no financial stake in the outcome. The system trains them to match applications to existing codes. It does not train them to invent new categories for technologies the codes did not anticipate. The path of least career risk for a code official faced with a rocket mass heater permit application is to deny it, refer the homeowner back to a manufactured appliance with a UL listing, and close the file. This is not a conspiracy. There is no meeting where these interests sit around a table and agree to suppress rocket mass heaters. The suppression is emergent. It comes from the natural alignment of incentives across an entire industry, where every single party benefits slightly from a regulatory environment in which a homeowner cannot legally build their own heater. Add up enough small benefits across enough institutions over enough decades, and you get walls that no one built, but that nobody has any incentive to remove. In some ways, this is more troubling than an active prohibition would be. A ban can be repealed. A regulation can be rewritten. There is a target, an opponent, a clear thing to push against. Emergent suppression has no center. There is no document to challenge, no decision to overturn, no person whose mind needs to be changed. There is just an absence where the permit category should be, and an insurance form that excludes the technology, and a building inspector who has never seen one of these and is not going to be the first to approve one. Which brings us to the contradiction at the heart of this story. If Liberator succeeds in EPA certification, if the rocket mass heater finally enters the regulatory frame, the version that emerges on the other side will not be the one Ianto Evans built in that Oregon barn. It will be a manufactured appliance sold by a company with a price tag in the thousands rather than the hundreds, certified to standards that require it to be a product rather than a technique. The $200 version, the one a family with no money could build over a long weekend with materials from a salvage yard, will still be exactly as illegal as it is today. Possibly more illegal, because the existence of a certified alternative will remove the last remaining argument for tolerating the unlicensed version. The suppression, in other words, may end with the technology becoming legal in a form that almost no one can afford. The version that mattered, the one that put high-efficiency wood heat within reach of anyone with hands and time, will remain on the wrong side of the wall. What this story finally reveals is something larger than rocket mass heaters. It is a feature of how modern regulation actually works. Codes are written to handle the objects that were available when the codes were written. New objects, especially ones that do not fit the manufacturing model the codes assume, fall into gaps. Those gaps are not neutral. They function as a kind of prohibition, more effective in many ways than an active ban would be, because there is nothing to fight against. There is no law to repeal. There is just an absence where the permit form should be, and a long silence at the building department, and an insurance policy that quietly excludes the technology you were thinking about installing. The cheapest, cleanest, most efficient wood-burning heater ever designed for the home has been sitting in plain sight for 45 years. It works. The physics has been independently modeled. The emissions have been measured. The operational record across thousands of off-grid installations is established. None of that is what determines whether it ends up in your house. What determines that is whether it fits the slot the regulators were already prepared to fill. Does not. And so it does not. If you want to see another piece of suppressed home energy technology that almost no one has heard of, watch the video on screen. It breaks it down, and it is on this channel right now.